So just a quick, my name is Faisal Shirazi. On behalf of Dara Jafriya, I would like to invite and thank all of you for coming today. Our theme is again today is extremism in our communities and how to combat it. And we have some great speakers to discuss those. And our very first speaker, I'll invite him right away, Seamus Hughes. He's the Deputy Director of the Program on Extremism at George Washington University, Center of Cyber and Homeland Security. It's a mouthful. He is a recognized expert on homegrown violent extremism and countering violent extremism, and also stands for CVE. Hughes previously worked at the National Counterterrorism Center, serving as a lead staffer on the United States government efforts to implement the national CVE strategy. He regularly led engagements with Muslim American communities across the country, provided counsel to civic leaders after high-profile terror-related incidents. Prior to NCTC, Hughes served as the Senior Counterterrorism Advisor for the U.S. Senate, Homeland Security, and Government Affairs Committee. He organized over a dozen congressional hearings on the threat of homegrown violent extremism and led fact-finding delegations to the various European and Middle Eastern countries. He authored 2 reports for the Senate, a ticking time bomb, counterterrorism lessons from the U.S. government's failure to prevent the Fort Hood attack, and Zachary Chesser, a study in online Islamist radicalization and its meaning for the threat of homegrown terrorism. He is a graduate of University of Maryland and a recipient of National Security Council Outstanding Service and 2 NCTC Director Awards for Outstanding Service. So I'd like to invite him, and please give him a warm welcome.
Great, thank you so much for the introduction, and I want to thank everyone for inviting me here. Again, my name is Seamus Hughes. I'm with the Program on Extremism. It's a new center we set up at George Washington University with my colleague Lorenzo. We launched about 3 months ago. Prior to that, I worked for the National Counterterrorism Center, and my job there was to have these type of conversations around the country. So when something bad happened, or if you wanted to get ahead of something, they'd call me and say, Seamus, we need to have conversations about how extremism is affecting our communities. So I'll give you an example. 3 girls from the Denver area jump on a plane bound for Turkey, where they're going to cross the border and join ISIS in Syria and Iraq. They get turned around in Frankfurt Airport in Germany because their father has called every phone number in the phone book, trying desperately to get them back. Luckily, the law enforcement and the community worked together and were able to turn those girls around. When that happened, the imam of the mosque calls me and says, Seamus, I don't understand how this happens. I don't understand how a 16-year-old girl, a 15-year-old girl, and a 17-year-old girl can get enthralled by this. Can you help me try to prevent this? I spent a number of times in Denver meeting with Muslim American communities, meeting with law enforcement, meeting with other members of the communities to try to figure out ways that we can do prevention on this so we don't have another 3 kids jumping on the plane. My goal when we do this type of conversations, when we have these type of meetings, is all about prevention. Because I spent a good amount of time talking to parents of kids that have made horrible decisions and they can't take it back. So I spent a good amount of time talking to parents of people that have joined terrorist organizations overseas who have died over there. And you see the pain and anguish on their face. So this prevention work is important to me because you never want to have that conversation. You want to be able to get on the front end. Because there was a time, whether you're inspired by ISIS or white supremacists or neo-Nazis or any form of violent extremist, there was a time where you were reachable, where someone saw a sign and someone could have reached out and brought that kid back from the brink. And that's why we have these type of things. This is an opening conversation, and I hope that one of many that we have. And Montgomery County is actually a model. They're leading the way on this, the good work that the Word is doing. So what I thought I'd do is give a little presentation on violent extremism of the non-ISIS variety. So we see a lot of stuff on terrorism and things like that, but I want to focus my presentation on the other forms of violent extremism. Because violent extremism doesn't have a single ideology, right? It runs the gamut. You have white supremacists, neo-Nazis, eco-terrorists, ISIS-inspired extremists, but there's no profile, right? A person that joins a violent extremist group can be old, they can be young, They can be rich, they can be poor, they can be well-educated, they can barely get out of high school, like those girls in Denver. They can be black, they can be white, male or female, which makes our prevention job much harder, right? It also means that you can't profile at airports because it's not going to work. But it also makes a prevention job a little bit harder. So we have to figure out ways to figure out what triggers people to make that decision. Go to the next slide. Can you go back one sec? Okay. So all violent extremist groups, no matter where they kind of fall in the ideological stream, essentially all look for vulnerabilities. They're looking for a way in. So if you're a recruiter for a neo-Nazi or a white supremacist group, you're trying to figure out what makes that kid tick. You know, what's the in you can use in order to help bring him into the fold? So is he getting bullied at school because he's wearing a hijab? Or did he not get that job because it went to a minority? Or did he not, is his life not working out the way he thought it was because of this? So violent extremist recruiters use that type of vulnerability and they say, you know what, let's focus on that grievance. There's a reason for that grievance, right? You didn't get that job, you're getting bullied at school, your life isn't what you thought it was for a reason. And that reason is that big enemy on the far side, right? It's the other. And they separate the world between us versus them. You're either with us or you're against us. And that's true across all violent extremist groups, whether you're a white supremacist or an ISIS-inspired terrorist. So they hold this black and white view that you have to be part of one or two. They also say, you know what, you want to solve this problem? You want to figure out this issue? The only way to do that is violence. You can't do the ballot box, it's got to be by the bullet. They say the only way you're going to solve your grievance is to pick up a gun. Next slide. Let's talk about this in action. So here's a guy named Robert Talbert. Robert is from Texas. In August 2013, he got on the FBI radar screen. And he got on the FBI radar screen because he was looking for that community of interest. He was looking for people online that held his same views. So Robert posted on a Facebook page, he set up the American Insurgency Movement. It was essentially Robert and a Facebook page, and he called for people to join his group. And he said the federal government was against us, and they're holding down all of us, and we need to figure out a way to band together and fight down the government. The other, right? The us versus them. And he said the only way to do that is to spill some blood, to have a rebellion. Again, that choice of violence is the only action. Robert went online to try to find like-minded individuals. He found that online because, like the olden days when you had someone who had a little bit of crazy views, they'd go to outside, they'd say their crazy views, and nobody would follow them, right? You'd say, oh, that guy's being crazy. Now you have the internet, you have a microphone to be able to get your information out. You can find more like-minded individuals much more easily online. And people like Robert Talbot are able to do that. Why I focus on this case when I'm talking about all forms of violent extremism is Robert wanted to knock over a bunch of Bank of America ATMs in Texas. And why did he want to do that? He wanted to steal the money and then use it to buy C4 and blow up mosques. This is how violent extremists kind of affect all communities. So you have a guy who believes in the federal government's out to get you. He's using violence to further his roles, and he's seeing the world in other. And the other in this case was mosques. And he thought if he blew up a few mosques, he'd start a revolution, and more like-minded people would be involved. Next slide. So how does somebody like Robert get involved in this type of stuff? If you click one more time, you type the word white pride into YouTube. One more. Yeah, this is what pops up. And I am a new father. I have a 1.5-year-old at home, so this scares me, right? But the internet's a scary place. It's also a great place. It's a scary place in this. If you type in certain keywords onto YouTube or Facebook or Ask.fm or Tumblr or any number of websites that most parents have no idea what they mean, if you type in any of those things, you're able to get this echo chamber out. So these are all videos of people supporting white supremacists, right? Readily available on mainstream sites. I say this not to scare anyone, but you need to be aware of what's happening. When I talk about those kids in Denver, those 3 girls there, they were recruited online, right? They had someone reached out to them on Twitter and said, you know what, you've been talking about how great ISIS is, why don't you come join us? Here's how you do it. Here's the 10 steps you do it. Here's an English language website on Tumblr in order to get step-by-step directions. So the bar for joining violent extremist groups has been lowered. It's easier to get the information you want to. It's also easier to get indoctrinated on this. You can watch hours and hours of videos of people saying white pride, how great this is, white America, things like that. You can get inundated by this online. Next slide. So we talk a lot about international terrorism, and that has an important place in this, and Hedy will talk about that in a number of areas, so I won't touch on that much, but I want to talk about domestic extremism. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about white supremacists or sovereign citizens or anti-government extremists. And since 2011, we've had 337 attacks in the homeland inspired by violent extremists of the non-foreign terrorist variety, including 254 fatalities. We talk a lot about international terrorism, that's important too, but there's other forms of violent extremism in our communities. So we need to figure out ways that we develop programs that can address all forms. And luckily you have that in Montgomery County. You have people that are willing to say, let's figure out things that work on this form of extremism and this form of extremism, and how do we get a program that matches up against it. Next slide. I think people have a general sense of what white supremacist movements is, but just want to give you a better belief of it. So there's basically four main organizations: the Brotherhood of the Clans, the Aryan Brotherhood, Aryan Nations, and the National Socialist Movement, of varying degrees of people that are joining those groups. The first hate site on the website, first hate site on the web was something called Stormfront. It has 300,000 users. It's a neo-Nazi website where people can go in and again, find that echo chamber, find that community of interest, and go back and forth on these type of things, and find like-minded people. When I talk about an echo chamber, I think it's important to remember a lot of these guys, and I've studied a lot of them, I talked to a lot of extremists, a lot of these guys, they just don't have anybody else telling them no. Right? Somebody's told them no before, they've blocked them out, and they've found somebody who's going to tell them yes. It's only going to tell them yes. Never going to see the world in another different way. So you have an echo chamber that says, do this, do this, do this. This is the right way. The point of prevention is that you're going to see at some point someone saying something that's a little bit concerning. You got to be that voice that says no. Have you thought about it this way? Bring them aside. Let's have a conversation about this. Let's figure out a way around this. Next slide. I'll touch slightly on sovereign citizens. It's more of a presentation I give for law enforcement officers, but it's concerning nonetheless. The sovereign citizen movement essentially believes that the federal government is not legitimate, and that there are a number of essentially believes that they're not legitimate, and you are a sovereign citizen and thus not subject to the laws of this country. Most sovereign citizens, the vast majority of sovereign citizens are nonviolent, although there have been cases of sovereign citizens that have attacked police officers when they stop. And it's an interesting movement with very unique identifications. I'm not sure it's particularly important on this meeting, but I'm happy to talk a little bit more on that in the next one. Next slide. Next slide. Let's give you just two quick examples, and I'll kick it over to Hedy. The first one was Jerry Kahn and his 16-year-old son, Joseph. Jerry and Joseph were in West Memphis. They got stopped by a cop, Sergeant Evans, I believe, for a routine traffic stop. The cop knocks on the window and says, Jerry, can you come out of the car? Something doesn't feel right. Jerry gets out of the car. While he's getting frisked by the police officer, his 16-year-old son opens the car door and shoots the police officer with an AK-47 variant. Kills the police officer instantly. The next police officer comes up to see what's going on. He hears officers down. That police officer's under fire by the AK-47, also dies. They ended up catching Jerry and Joe at a Walmart parking lot, which the police surrounded them, and there was a firefight, and both men passed away. Again, what I want to hammer home on this is violent extremism is not a single ideology. We hear a lot about it in the news, and there are concerns about ISIS-inspired terrorism, and rightly so. They have a landmass the size of the UK. It's concerning that a terrorist organization has that. There's also other forms of violent extremism that we should be aware of, and I hope we have some information on that. The next one I think we all are aware of is Dylan Roof. Dylan is a 21-year-old gentleman who went into a Bible study in South Carolina, killed 9 people while they were praying. If you looked at his manifesto that he posted on his website, it was littered with white supremacist diatribes. And so, again, what I want to hammer home Violent extremism is not one single form of ideology. And the reason why I wanted to present this too is unfortunately a number of people in this audience may be a target for these type of violent extremist groups. Right? They put you in the other category, that black and white category. So you need to be aware of those type of things, aware of your surroundings. Know who you can reach out to in your law enforcement to have a conversation if you see something that's concerning around your local faith communities. Right? You're part of the other in their worldview, which I'm sorry about, but we have to figure out ways to go around that so we can help protect our communities on this. I'll leave it there. I'm happy to answer any questions and the questions and answers respectively, especially on the prevention angle, because I think there's a lot of areas where the violent extremism organizations are trending younger. So they're recruiting younger and younger people. So there's a window there where we can bring our young people back into the fold before they make a decision that alters their life irreparably. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Cerise, thank you so much for a very good presentation. I'd like to invite my next speaker. She inspires me a lot, and I'm a big fan of hers. So I'm gonna give her, sorry, I need my glasses, I'm getting older. So I'll give her a proper introduction. Dr. Hadiya Mir Ahmadi, she was a lawyer by profession, JD, currently serves as the president of the World Organization for Resource Development and Education, that stands for WORD, W-O-R-D-E, a nonprofit organization dedicated to reducing conflict between diverse societies. She's a world-renowned expert in community-based programming that promotes social cohesion and builds resilience against violent extremism. In furtherance of that mission, Dr. Mir Ahmadi established the International Culture Center, ICC, where people from diverse traditions perform community service, participate in educational programs, and share in artistic expression in order to foster peaceful coexistence and social harmony. In recognition of her important work in interfaith relations, she was appointed to the Montgomery County Executive Faith Community Advisory Council, for whom the co-chairs the Faith Community Working Group, FCWG. She's also a board member of the Montgomery County Collaboration Council for Children, Youth, and Families. She's the author and co-author of several books and monograms, Overpowering Pakistan's Civil Society to Counter Global Violent Extremism, a strategic plan for empowering Pakistan's civil society to counter violent extremism, Afghanistan 2014 and beyond, the role of civil society and peace building and countering violent extremism, and many more. She's also a chapter contributor to the books Abraham's Children, Liberty and Tolerance in Age of Religious Conflict, Islam and Civil Society, and the other Muslim, moderate, and secular publications as well. So please be a warm welcome.
Would you mind pulling up the other one? Down here, it's pretty loud. That's like a little technical difficulty. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Hope everyone's doing well. Maybe I'll put that down here. You think so? How's that? Is that better? No? Maybe if I put it really low? Okay. I think if you turn down the volume of the mic too, would probably be better. So as Faisal mentioned, I am co-chair of the Faith Community Working Group in Montgomery County, and Seamus made reference to it too. We're actually a nationally, now internationally renowned model that's known as the Montgomery County model, and we are kind of revolutionizing community policing in the sense that it's a community-led effort to build social cohesion and public safety, and basically helping law enforcement build partnerships with the community that are based on mutual respect and coexistence. and also allowing the community to take active part in shaping the programming and the kind of activities that the community policing model uses. So we're really excited about that. And if you want to learn more about the program, it's open to all Montgomery County residents, anybody who works in Montgomery County organizations, everyone is welcome. So we have material outside if you're interested. I've been asked to, if you don't mind, turn it, yeah, there you go. So this is a risk assessment matrix that we've developed at Word, and we adapt it based on the conflict that we are referring to and the recruitment patterns that we're referring to. So I've been asked to speak about ISIS-related recruitment, so that's why I've adapted it to this version. And Faisal also asked me to speak specifically about the manipulation of religious teaching that is encouraging this behavior in addition to the other risks. So if you bear with me, I'm going to start with the other ones, and then I'll get to the deviant religious concepts as well. So the way we conceptualize, stay on that slide, back of the matrix. So the way we conceptualize the risk of violent extremism is that there's no single pathway. So millions of dollars have been spent in research, and we haven't proven a single causal factor. So basically, this is all based on cases that have occurred in the past, and people are doing research on what are some common patterns. So the fact that we can't prove causation doesn't mean that we can't understand risk and try to mitigate risk. So the idea of the graphic is just a way of conceptualizing all the things a person may be going through so that we're able to address them in a coherent way. So political grievances. For Syria in particular, in the early days, it's what a lot of people described as people were very disturbed by the images that they saw, and that what they felt was oppression from the Assad regime. So it was a very strong pull factor that made young people, vulnerable people realize or feel that they wanted to go and do something. They wanted to go and help in some way. And they felt at the time, the way the reports go, is that there wasn't any cooperation. The Arab governments weren't doing anything, the West wasn't doing anything, and it was the job of individuals to go over and participate and help the people. And interestingly now, the rhetoric and the indoctrination has changed. Now, because there's the anti-ISIL coalition, the rhetoric is, now they're bombing us, come and fight the enemy. So it's interesting that they're able to reverse the indoctrination, which tells you that it's not so much a political grievance anymore, it's a recruitment tool, because the argument has shifted to the exact opposite rationale. So in the beginning it was, nobody's helping us, and now it's like, everybody's trying to hurt us. So that's for the political grievances. And then it was also described, like somebody invented the term a humanitarian jihad, that they felt compelled to respond to the atrocities of the people they felt, the videos they saw, the images that they saw coming out of Syria, that it was their desire to relieve human suffering. So it wasn't radicalization per se. It's not that they had adopted these deviant religious philosophies, but that they really wanted to go and help. And that posed a serious challenge for governments, because how do you stop people? How do you legislate it? How do you prevent people from going when it's not because they want to be terrorists, it's because they want to help? And so I think to a large extent that remains a challenge. Oh, maybe it's because it's getting feedback from the, hold on, Mike. Can you turn the volume down a little bit too? Maybe that'll help. Sorry. The next one is thrill seekers. So again, it's the concept that young men especially are looking for a sense of adventure, and girls who want to marry a handsome hero. And I mention girls because, unfortunately, as Seamus pointed out to you, it was 3 young teenage girls who went to join ISIS as well. So it's becoming an increasingly large problem that young girls are going, and they say that it's kind of this romanticized version of who they're going to find when they get there. Also, it seems to be attracting people with antisocial tendencies, so people who just want to be part of something that is terrorizing the whole world. It's like a counterculture antisocial movement, and it's attracting those kind of individuals as well. Economic motivators. So a number, especially of the American homegrown violent extremists that I've gone over, they're suffering from what we call relative deprivation. In other words, their sense of poverty or of deprivation compared to their peers. So they feel like they can't get the things that their peers get. They can't live the kinds of life that their peers are living, and they want an alternative. One of the gentlemen who recruited his suicide attack, who had his suicide attack videotaped, he said in a video that I haven't eaten food like I've eaten here in Syria in my life. So every time I go back to my room, there's all of this wonderful fruit and food available for me that nobody's ever provided. And so I think that that's a really telling example of what people are motivated by. Psychosocial factors, very, very important. I'm sure you see this all the time, the issue of mental illness. It's not a very severe chronic mental illness. It's almost like a mild post-traumatic stress disorder, suffering from a difficult home life, abused family, single-parent households where they're neglected. All these kind of subtle mental traumas that they're suffering from. Some have had more severe instances of depression, but it just seems to be increasingly more relevant. And in fact, of the recent research of cases in the United States, 40% of them had some indication of suffering from a mental illness. The sociological conditions, alienation and isolation, again, tends to be a very prominent issue, and especially in the European cases and the Western cases where Muslim kids especially are feeling alienated, harassed, isolated from their communities, and are increasingly drawn to this kind of counterculture movement. And so if you notice, the way we've drawn it, a lot of these factors overlap. And the issue is that when they're combined together, they provide a powerful framework for why one person is drawn to violent extremism. They could be two kids in a household, one is drawn to it and the other isn't. And it's just, as Seamus says, it's very, very hard to detect. Next slide. And I usually run through these examples, especially when I'm in a mixed audience of not just Muslims, but with non-Muslims as well, because I think it's really important before I get into deviant understandings of Islam that are motivating people to join ISIS. I think it's important to understand, and I've tried to capture it from all schools of thought's perspectives, but some kind of basic mainstream views about Islam. And so it's just really important that people realize that the deviant understandings are violating the very strong tenets of Islam that focuses on the unity of mankind, the equality of each soul, applying to both men and women equally, and that wanting, as we heard from the verse of the Quran that was recited, the equality of human being, and that people are judged by their piety and their sincerity. And that's really important, and that always in the Quran that the Jews and Christians are always treated as Ahl Kitab, as people of the book. And of course, the prophets, Jesus and Moses, are revered as very important prophets of Islam as well. And as you hear, let's, in a verse of the Quran, say, O people of the book, let us rally to a common formula to be binding on both us and you, that we worship none but God, that we associate no partners with him. And these are just two small examples of the verses of the Quran which encourage Muslims towards practice of forgiveness and compassion and mercy for all mankind. Next slide. So for almost 1,400 years, mainstream scholars have developed rulings based on guidance from the Quran and the traditions of the Prophet. And these were used to resolve issues that arise for Muslims in each era, using various methodologies depending on your school of thought. And the practice has led to very rich and diverse and complex, oftentimes very complex, legal traditions in Islam. But in contrast to what the mainstream scholars do to come up with rulings to fit the era, extremists often quote the Quran and the Hadith, the traditions of the Prophet, out of context and reinterpret the scripture in a very shallow and dogmatic manner that bypasses the century of scholarly exegesis in order to incite violence. And the way in which they're interpreting it is a way that was actually never dreamed of by previous scholars. Next slide. So I've focused on, I think it's the 4, right? Okay. So I've tried to focus on some broad concepts that are motivating vulnerable individuals to join. And despite the overwhelming majority of Muslims that have condemned a lot of these interpretations and that have a very nuanced and pluralistic interpretation of Islam, these extremist tenets still motivate others. So the valid caliphate, lots of controversy over that. So as we know, ISIS claims that they have reestablished the caliphate, and they're actually one of the first terror groups to do so. And so they basically say that as part of their justification of the validity of their state, that they have the support of those that bind and loosen, ahal wa aql. So they said that they have the allegiance of the local tribes, and they have this authority, they control territory, and therefore they're a valid state. As a consequence of their belief and justification of being a valid state, they invoke concepts that existed 1,400 years ago as part of this valid state. So you see these things about slavery, the right-hand possession, all these other things that you're just wondering how in the world are they coming up with that, is because they're bringing up doctrine that existed in a time when all of humanity had slavery, but what has since been abolished hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So that's where they're drawing this from. Mainstream scholars in response are saying, first of all, you cannot revive a caliphate. There is nothing in the traditions that allow for that reappearance. And so basically, no matter what they say, whatever you say that you have the support of the local people, you cannot be a caliphate. Whether they're a nation state is another issue, but that it's not what they're calling to be a caliphate. Other scholars at the other end of the spectrum say, well, maybe you could create a state, but you definitely haven't gotten the authority of the people that bind and loosen, so the people of authority. So that's why you're not valid. So basically, I mean, probably 99.9% of scholars, whatever school of thought they may be, have refuted the existence of this being a valid caliphate. But nonetheless, young people, vulnerable people, go on the internet, see this material, and are motivated by it. The bifurcated worldview, which is something that Seamus referred to a lot in the white supremacist context, but this is the us versus them. This is the bifurcated worldview of these two communities, Muslim against non-Muslim. We will never meet. We will never be compatible, and therefore we must separate. And so this is a constant repeated theme in the indoctrination process, and something that is relevant, I think, to both spectrums of violent extremism. Next slide. So takfirism is, people, you may have heard this expression before, the takfiris, and it's basically the practice of declaring a Muslim who does not share their particular interpretation of Islam as not a Muslim, and then basically reclassifying that individual as a kafir. And it's a cause of tremendous bloodshed, as you all know, in the world today. It's a cause of intra-Muslim bloodshed around the world. It is a very, very tragic part of what the extremists are doing. And in a lot of the cases, not only do they declare them to be a kafir, the redefining Muslims, but basically saying they're wajib al-qatl, meaning they're worthy of being killed. Unfortunately, the conflicts in Syria and Iraq have seen a tremendous rise in Takfiri ideology. And this is something that Anwar al-Awlaki, though he was killed several years ago at an airstrike, his material continues to live online and motivate young people, and he focused a lot on that ideology. Next slide. So I'm sure you've heard also about the manipulation of the teaching of jihad, and it is, I don't know if the video is going to play on your computer, but this is a clip from Dr. Tara Qadri, who wrote the exegesis on suicide bombing in Islam and basically refuting the tenets that the extremists use to justify jihad and suicide bombing. So oh great. I don't know if you could hear the sound though, but. Yeah. Can you hear it? It's a little. I think it's allowed. It's okay. It's okay. But so basically, what he's refuting is that the word jihad and fighting does not appear together in the text of the Quran. So it's basically their manipulated understanding and interpretation of jihad that makes it seem as if combative jihad is prominent in Islam. And so there's also this quote from Awlaki about how, and this is the opposite view, of course, that jihad, this obsessive focus on combative jihad, and that this is the time for people to be committed to jihad, that jihad is a combative jihad is a continual obligation, and then it's just this reinforced indoctrination, almost making jihad the sixth pillar of Islam. And of course, we're not talking about the traditional interpretations of jihad being a struggle and educating and working with your neighbors, but this is specifically a violent, combative interpretation of jihad. Next. And again, this is a great quote, I think, by Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad in England, where he says that the idea that freelance terrorists would enter paradise as martyrs by murdering unarmed civilians is a modern invention, one that would have horrified Muslims in the past. Islam is not a death cult. And I think that that's a very appropriate description of the mainstream response to the obsessive focus on violence and terrorism. And that's it. I'll also be happy to take your questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very good presentation. Now, I'd like to invite our rabbi, because we just love him so much, and Rabbi Sonny Schnitzer, and he's the rabbi of Bethesda Jewish Congregation, Bethesda, Maryland. He's been the key figure in the most of our interfaith activities from the BGC community. He's also the president of the Cuba American Jewish Mission. They're helping the Jews of Cuba return to their heritage and provide them with needed humanitarian aid. He's been involved with all of our interfaith activities from very beginning for like 8, 9, 10 years, something like that, going back, way back. It's been almost 10 years now. So I'd like to welcome him. Please give him a warm welcome.
I pray that God gives me words to speak to our condition today. First of all, that was a very lovely introduction. Thank you, because to be told by someone who doesn't share my faith, but by brothers and sisters who share my beliefs, that you call me rabbi, it tears my heart in beautiful ways. Thank you. I can think of no higher compliment. I'm also wondering why I'm here today. I have no expertise, as do my colleagues, on terrorism and extremism, but I can speak to toxicity of our condition and the atmosphere that we have created that allows extremism to flourish. We have to take some responsibility, and here's how we do it. So I'm watching Fox News. Yes, I like to occasionally see what the other side is thinking. And already in October, I'm hearing about the war on Christmas. Now, there is no war on Christmas. There cannot be a war on Christmas. But there is a change in America. We are becoming a more multicultural society. America is moving closer to living out its dream, which is that no single religious group dictates the culture of the general nation. And of course, those who have felt that power for hundreds of years now resent it. So anything that changes the old status quo now is a war. You notice the words that are used. It's not the change of religion in the public sphere. It's a war. It's a battle. We hear lies. Sister Hedya spoke of them. Lies about all of our traditions, whether it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism. There are always those who are going to use religious teachings for political purposes. And because at its core, spirituality and religion are not about politics, but are about the internal life of each worshiper and their relationship with God, when someone begins to say, we as a culture now must go to war, we've missed the point of religion. Because all religions have but three purposes. The great Rabbi Gamliel of the Talmud taught that the world stands on three things: on truth, on justice, and peace. We all know that the first is the most difficult, because truth, we have been told, is relative. And indeed, when people say truths are absolute, that's where we run into violence, because then we have somebody saying, I have the sole truth, everyone else is in error, and therefore it is permissible to do what we must with them so that we can all live in the truth that I have decided is the truth. But we all hear it. We all hear lies, and I'm afraid that all too often we are quiet. How many times have you gone to a family event and someone says something about Jews, Muslims, perhaps Christians? I hear it in my own family. Actually, I hear it, believe it or not, from a relative who works for the FBI, who, because he's in the counterterrorism unit, I've seen now has begun to harbor biases against Muslims, because he works all day with those who are violent, and he works all day with those who would harm others and harm this nation and other nations. Those are the people he's chasing. So it's only a small step to suddenly go from blaming the individuals to blaming a group of individuals, and that's where the error lies. So what do we do with that? And this, for my congregants who are here, and I'm really pleased so many are here today, you've already heard some of this because it is the theme of my Rosh Hashanah remarks to our congregation just a few weeks ago. But that is that all of us, when we hear something that is baloney, that we know it's a lie, need to say in that moment when the challenge arises, regardless of what it does to our familiar relationships, excuse me, that's a lie. That is a lie. We have to all find the courage to stand up and say that is not true. We have to say it to individuals. The Torah, that book shared by Jews and Christians, and which had so much influence on the prophet and so much influence on the Quran, the holy books, that one has to distance oneself from a false matter. Indubitably, truth is the most important factor for the welfare of any society. It's difficult to imagine a society that can thrive or survive for long if no one cares about honesty. Now, there are times in all of our traditions, and in fact in both the Islamic and Jewish tradition, we have times where we know we are supposed to lie. There are times where we're told, no, lying's the right thing. We should lie in a situation where honesty might cause harm to another person. We should lie for the sake of decency, not telling the truth perhaps about intimate matters. We should lie in a situation where we can preserve the cause of peace or not hurt another's feeling. There's a story in the Talmud that says, why is every bride beautiful? To keep peace. But those lies are the exceptions. We have these statements that are so plain in all of our tradition that God hates one who speaks one thing with his mouth and another thing in his heart. That whoever breaks his word is regarded as though he had worshipped idols, and he cannot receive the divine presence. And the first question, according to the Jewish Talmud, that we are asked on Judgment Day when we stand in heaven, have you been honest in your dealings with other human beings? The first question. Are any of us going to pass that test? That's what we should strive for. And to make that matter so acutely within each of us is what will change, I believe, the equation. Because when a young man comes to me and says, I'm going to Israel and I'm going to settle in the West Bank, and I'm going to take up the struggle to build the third temple. This is hypothetical. No one has ever come to me and said this. But I'm going to go now join the struggle to build the third temple on the noble enclosure, on the Temple Mount. I have to be the one to say, you're a fool. You're an idiot. Why would you go and take a place that for 11,000 years has, 1,100 years, has been at relative peace, and turn it into a war zone? There is a third temple up on that mountain. It's called the Dome of the Rock. And it should be the house, as the prophet Isaiah said, a house for all peoples. But we have to begin to diffuse the underlying causes of terrorism by beginning to diffuse the toxic atmosphere that our politicians have created, by turning us against each other, by causing us to see each other as Jews, Muslims, Christians, Mexicans, Syrians. Take your pick of the people who are in desperate need of peace and solace in this country, and treat them all as Americans and as human beings. And when we hear our politicians and leaders say, not so fast, maybe some of them we shouldn't treat as equals, those are the ones we have to say, you're a liar. And you must tell everyone within earshot, that man, that woman is a liar. The only way in America that things change is to engage the process of change. And that works through the political system. It would be the greatest mitzvah, the greatest commandment of all, for all of us in this room today to engage politically so that we can build the society that we know we deserve. It's the only way it happens here. And generations upon generations of immigrants have made those changes. My grandparents came from Poland, Russia, Ukraine. Yours, many of you, from Pakistan, from India, from other countries. It is only by seeing ourselves as an American people and seeing America as the promise for humanity that there is a better way, that I believe we can turn the hearts and minds of confused people who are hurt, are lonely, are angry. We have to meet them with love, but we have to be firm. Thank you.
Sunny, thank you so much for those nice words, and you're exactly here for this reason. So, can somebody pull this up, please? I don't think we don't have any more presentations. Yeah. So I'd like to invite our resident scholar and Imam Sheikh Jalil from Dara Jafriya. He has served many communities in the Washington, D.C. area and other Muslim communities across the United States and Ghana. The breadth of his training also covers services as a translator in Arabic, English, and Farsi, a radio journalist, and he has been teaching logic, Arabic literature, basic Islamic disciplines, Islamic history, and he has taught teaching of Quranic recitation and memorization. Sheikh Abdul Jalil holds an MA from Imam Khomeini School of Pomegranate as well. Please welcome our Imam Jalil.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيبي وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل عليه وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في محكم تنزيله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم صدق الله العلي العظيم. My dear brothers and sisters, I would like to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and to peace to all of you as well. Before I proceed, I would like to take a moment to thank all of you for coming to our center and being with us this evening to talk about one of the most important challenges of the world that we live today. And I would also like to thank our speakers who gave us so many information, useful information that we all can use and benefit, inshallah, to solve this crisis that is threatening all humanity at large. Without taking much of your time, as you heard, I just want to focus in 5 or 10 minutes about how extremism hurt Islam itself before anybody else. Because a lot of time what we hear about how Muslims hurt other Muslims. How Quran say kill infidels, kill non-Muslims. But we never heard to talk about how those people kill Muslims themselves. In other words, I want to say, extremism doesn't have boundaries, doesn't have culture, doesn't have anything other than either you agree with me or you die. And let me take you back, brothers and sisters, historically. The first person to deal with this extremism was our prophet. He was a prophet, chosen leader, but people who were extremists, they want to override him, telling him what to do. And I'll give you one example. So many examples in Islamic history. One example, the Prophet ﷺ, he is the prophet, he is the leader. He comes and he gives his opinion about something, and certain people will come and say, no, we don't want it. It should be the other way around. And what is it? It's all about killing. I'll give you one incident in history. And this is in Islamic history speaking. The Prophet ﷺ got some of the prisoners of war and he brought them. And the Prophet wants to hear the opinion of the companion. And the Prophet said, what do you think we should do? We have now prisoners of war. What should be the best way to deal with them? Now somebody would say, just kill them. That's an answer. Just kill them. That's all. One of them will say, no, I think the best thing is just put them in prison, life imprisonment, and just leave them. All kind of ideas. Then the Prophet will come and say, no. I have a better idea. What is it? He said, they will all be freed under one condition. What is it? He said, the condition is, I want all of them to educate those who don't know, and that is they're free. And then they'll come and teach and be freed. But even the Prophet, he was the leader, but people want to override him for not doing what they want him to do. This didn't stop there, brothers and sisters. This continued throughout the history. It happened after the Prophet. That the extremism, as we speak today, because the title of today is Hussein Day. So I want to take you to Imam Hussein. Because Imam Hussein, what is the cause of Imam Hussein's death? It was extremism. The reason why Imam Hussein, he and his companions, 72, were all killed on one day in the land of Karbala was extremism. What is it? Because he said no to them, they said either you agree or you die. That's it. Extremism. They know that he's a grandson of the Prophet. They know that he is on the right path because they want him to bow down and submit to the will, which he said now, which he knew, and everybody knows throughout the history, they were not legitimate leaders. They are not qualified. And he said no. Why? Because these are the people who were also killing innocent lives. When you go back to the history, and I'm speaking history, Islamic history, that, for example, when you go back to the history, people like Yazid who killed Imam Hussein, in his time there were thousands and thousands of innocent people in prison, and their crime is because they were saying no to him. Because they were not agreeing with him. So they all have to be killed. Imam Hussein alayhi salam comes and says, no. These people, they have freedom of choice. People were chosen. When you go back to the history, during that time, Imam Hussein was in Mecca. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of letters inviting him to come and be the leader. And that is why historically, he sent his cousin, Muslim bin Aqil, to go and take the pledge from people. But the leader of that time, when he saw that, he said, no. Either you agree with me and come with me and you live, or you go against me and you die. Now, people who pledge for Imam Hussein, all of them were killed. All of them. And one of the leaders of those people, one of them is Hani bin Urwa. And his crime, because of the reason why he was killed, because he hosted the ambassador of Imam Hussein. That's all his crime. Why would you host a man who is against us? That was his crime. And not only he got killed, not only the ambassador of Imam Hussein was killed, not only that the hosts were killed. Now go back to history and see, how did they get killed? It's horrific, brothers and sisters. What you see today, that, okay, this ISIS, this group are doing to the people, it was done past too. At the time of when they killed this Muslim bin Aqil, he and his host, they took them to the top of the building. And they chopped their head off. You think that is all? No. When the head was fallen, they pushed the body also. The body fell down, the head, and they came down. Then they found the ropes. They tied the ropes with the bodies, and they started dragging the bodies throughout the sea. What is it? So that they can give a message to the people. Anybody who dare to come out and stand in front of us, that is what's going to happen to you. Can you find any extremism worse than that? These are Muslims. These are people that ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, and they know this is the grandson of the Prophet, but that's how they treat him. And the reason is what? Extremism. Not only that, after they killed these people, they did whatever they did. Imam Hussein comes. Because what happened, historically, when after Muslim bin Aqil came, the ambassador of Imam Hussein came to Kufa, and he got the pledges, he sent the message to Imam Hussein, come on, the people are with you, hurry up. Imam Hussein gathered his family, his companions, they're all on the way coming to Kufa. When they got into Kufa, they found out, no, things have changed. Imam Hussein said, okay, let me go back. No, you're not going back. Now, is there anything I need to do? Yes, the only thing you have to do is to pledge, put your hand in the hand of Yazid, and that's it. Or death. And Imam Hussein said, how can that be? I know this man. مثلي لا يبايع مثل Yazid. A man like me would not be pledging for a man like this guy. Because, first, this person, historically speaking, and you can check all the Islamic history. I'm not speaking about one history, not the other. I'm talking about the major history. For example, if you look at the Tariq al-Tabari, Tabari is one of the main historians, and Mufassir as well. And then you go to Tariq ibn Athir. These are main Islamic historians. They all mention about this story. Brothers, not only that, even right after the death of the Prophet, right, there's horrific things that happen among the Muslims. Now, before I come back to the Imam Hussein's story, let me take you back again. There is another horrific story happened right after the death of the Prophet, during the time of the first Caliph. Who was it? Khalid ibn Walid. He was sent to go and receive zakat. What happened? He went there. There was a man called Malik ibn Nuwaira. What happened to him? Malik ibn Nuwaira was killed. And historical, brother, is so bad to me. But this is the fact. But what happened after Malik ibn Nuwaira was killed? They cut the head. And can you imagine? Because Malik ibn Nuwaira, historically, he has a very long hair. So what happened? They used his hair and set up a fire and cook on those heads. And this was right after the Prophet died. And these are the Muslims. They treated another Muslims like that. These are the history that happened among the Muslims. So I don't want to go too deep into this. When we talk about the extremism, how people getting killed, what Muslims themselves face is more than anybody else. So extremism is a threat not just for non-Muslims, it's a threat for the Muslims themselves. And that is why we all have to work as a team to stop this threat that is coming. Because, as we mentioned again and again, those people, they don't know any language. Unfortunately, you saw on some of the TV, some of the videos, in the name of Allah, the name of Islam, they do these horrific things. And some of the people you see they kill, they're Muslims too. The reason they kill them because they fail to be on the same page like them. Now, here's the thing, brothers and sisters. Now, going back to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Imam Hussein was also one of the victims of extremism. Because during his time, this guy who was killing innocent life, who was doing all kind of bad things, Imam Hussein alayhi salam stood and said no to him. Can't do that. Can't kill people unjustly. You cannot hurt people. And that caused him his life. And brothers, I don't want to get into it. If you want to know more, inshallah, days are coming that you see. A lot of history has been mentioned about how Imam Hussein got killed. And all because of extremism. But brothers and sisters, there's no time, but I just want to mention some of the solutions Islamically, because these are the problems, but what are the solutions? Because we're talking about the disease, we have to talk about what? Remedy. One of the solutions is what I believe Dr. Rabbi mentioned. And the Prophet also mentioned this over 1,000 years ago. What was it? The Prophet mentioned, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. Every one of you is responsible. It's not about a government. It's not about a group of people. Each one of us have the role to play in stopping this threat that is coming to all humanity. Don't wait, brothers and sisters, and say, until government can. No. You do your part. Government has to do their part too. And how do we do our part? One, we all have to stay vigilant in our communities. In our societies, in my mosque, I see a person, the way he talks, the way he moves, looks like he's threat. I need to keep eye on him. We need to make sure that we watch him very close. We see a person comes in our society, we don't know him, he talks to the youth, we need to watch them carefully. What is he about to? Where is he coming from? What is he talking about the youth? What is his mind? What is it? We have to make sure that we always watch our communities. And I mentioned this over and over in our Jum'ah prayers. That is one of the solutions, brothers and sisters. That is number one. Number two, the second solution. The second solution is on the shoulder of the parents. Most of us as a parents, we are more into our own world and leave our children in different world. That is a problem. Most of us, we don't play our role as a parents because I am a parent, but I play a role of just a roommate with my children. We meet at home, we eat dinner, and that's it. But what is my child is up to? Who does he talk to? Who does he go with? I have no clue. That is a problem. Because the mind of the children is like empty land. If you don't plant something, the rain will plant something for you, whether you like it or not. Look at your backyard. If you don't plant something you want, trust me, the rain will bring something. Whether you like it, it's going to be there. The mind of your children is the same. If you don't plant something good, someone in the Middle East somewhere will plant something, and then you tell us, oh, what happened? How did that happen? Yes, because you're not paying attention. That is another thing that is on the shoulder of the parents, all of us. I have to watch my child, talk to them, see what is going on in their mind, know what they're up to, know who they go with, know who they talk to. You have to know as a parent's responsibility. That is number 2. Number 3, brothers and sisters, education. And when I say education, I mean proper education. What do I mean by proper education? Brothers and sisters, all of us, we're worried about what to eat, right? I want to be on diet, I want to stay on feet, I don't want to eat this because I'm going to be overweight and all of that. We're concerned about food so that we stay fit, which is good. But one thing we neglect is we never be careful about the food of the mind we give our children. And that is the most important part. When I want to educate my child, whether any religion that I want to, first I want to make sure that the person I'm sending my child to is a good and he knows the religion through one, not somebody messed up. That is one of the problems. Because sometimes, okay, well, he's an alim, or he's a good speaker, but I'm not sure about what is his upbringing. What is his ideas? What is his mentality? Where is he coming from? Who is it affiliated to? Right? I don't know all about it, but I said to my child, just go learn Quran. And then my child goes there, and then this guy teaches him Quran, and then he's pouring one poison every day. And my child comes home, mashallah, memorized half of the Quran. My child knows, mashallah, but he's memorizing Quran, but half of the mind is all poison. That is one of the problems, brothers and sisters. Whatever we send our children to learn any religion, it is our responsibility when they come, sit with them, ask them, make a time for them to know what did they feed him or her in this mind. Because brothers and sisters, this brain is like a tree. You can always change it when it's a little. But when it becomes a tree, then I tell you, forget it. The moment you want to try to shred it, it's going to break. No way. Because trust me, all these changes that we see, that these girls who run from Denver, it didn't happen one night. No, trust me. It took a time. But where were the parents? Where were they? Nobody was paying attention. So one of the most important things is, we as a parent, we as a community, we have to be vigilant to whomever we send our children to learn religion. Don't be fooled by nice look, nice voice. No. Don't be fooled by nice character that you see the first day. You might see it looks good, but it contains so many poisons. These are some of the things that if we work as a team, inshallah, with the help of Allah, we might be able to overcome those threats that comes in our way. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help all of us to overcome these threats, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring all of us unite together in order to fight this threat that is threatening all of us. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Really, as usual, very inspiring words. So there's going to be a quiz now, so what you guys have learned so far. So to summarize, so the extremism is not, it's part of every community, and it's not part of religion, but it's even you look at examples in Burma, for example, the Buddhists we always consider as the most peaceful people. They've been killing Muslims in Burma, for example. And it's not the Buddhist religion which teaches that, it's the people involved in that politics of that environment get sucked into that and do those type of crimes. Again, the people here who want to join interfaith activities, we want to focus on not hate or the fear. Fear is one of the biggest motivator that you can say that, okay, that can either suppress you or can also motivate you to go do something about it. So our life should be run from the love and compassion and from looking forward to doing the right things in the right way. So I'm going to open now the podium for question and answer, and then we should have dinner after this, inshallah. So we have one moment here. Who has first question?
Actually look at the So how do you actually do it? It's increasingly difficult. It's very, very hard, which means that you can't solve it overnight. So what I would recommend is you look at a model like Montgomery County where they bring in social workers, mental health professionals, parents, teachers, law enforcement, all around the room and say, you know what, I don't know if this kid's acting a little weird, but something seems a little bit off. Let's have a conversation with them. And it may be nothing. It may just be a teenager being a teenager, right? And then you move on and you go on to the next issue. Or maybe something greater. And if it's something greater, then you look around the table and says, what do we have in civil society that can help solve this problem? Can bring this kid back? Is the answer going to be religious training? Sometimes it is, but most times it's not. Is it going to be a mentor or a soccer coach that might be able to help? Maybe. Is it a mental health issue? Should we bring in our mental health professionals that we have a number of in our community that are willing to do pro bono work to help us on these types of things? How do we bring them to the table on these issues? So the answer, there's not a good answer for you. So profiling doesn't work because just empirically it doesn't work. But it makes the problem set harder.
My name is Hamza Chaudhary. I'm the Muslim community, and against the extremism, we have this loyalty to homeland. And this is the seminar next Sunday. Everybody can attend it. But the thing is that Khilafat is a divine thing that came from God. And the Khilafat that is ISIS, that's the one you can compare our Khilafat, Ahmadiyya Muslim community Khilafat, with the ISIS Khilafat. And you will see we have just have 100 years of Khilafat celebrated in our community. But my question is that, as we know in America, there are so many guns and these things are right there. And that's why we cannot control the extremism. Same thing in the ISIS. So where they are getting all the weapons and all the machinery to kill people. So my question is to you that why they have so many weapons that
I know this is referred to a lot. There's a lot of things on the internet. Not that I'm going to be naive about it, or that people say, "Oh yeah, America's third ISIS." I mean, the reality is we were fighting a very long war in Iraq. So there were a lot of weapons, a lot of tanks, a lot of armored vehicles that were left there. So the question is, how did these get in other people's hands? Very easily. I mean, we pulled out of Iraq. So, when you go from hundreds of thousands of troops to zero, a lot of stuff gets left behind. So I think that's one of the most unfortunate realities of what's the byproducts of, over a decade of war. So I don't think we need to resort to conspiracy theories. The pure facts of what happened, I think, would explain a lot of
the weaponry that's available there.
I think the other factor too is, especially now, ISIS has resources, and there's big money backing them. So there are no shortage of arms merchants in the world who are happy to sell you the latest technology for a profit. So it's not just what the U.S. and the allies in the Iraq War left behind; it's what is on the market today in a worldwide problem, and it's a very big economic engine for many countries, including countries you wouldn't think of, like Czechoslovakia, which is a big small arms manufacturer. I wanted to go to something you said, though, Dr. Chowdhury, and that was, you mentioned the program, you mentioned to me earlier in the hallway about loyalty to homeland, which your mosque is going to be promoting. And with all respect, I will tell you that the idea of blind loyalty to a homeland, a clan, a tribe, even a religion, is one of the greatest evils in the world. We should not be loyal to a homeland, we should be loyal to ideas. We should be loyal to our highest principles, regardless of where your place of origin is. It's something I was trying to say before, which I said inartfully, I think, that my grandparents came here, I mentioned, and they wanted to be part of the American dream. And all of us who are now blessed to be in this country should try to be part of the American dream, but make sure the dream is the American dream of our dreams. So that is what we need to be loyal to. I need to be loyal to each of my friends here and to all of you to make sure that my words help shape the world I wish to see.
I like that.
I'm Doug Samuel. Individuals dealing with individuals. A translation of me that we do have laws against hate speech in the United
States, especially since online was developed after
tries to harm our friend, our neighbor.
For everybody.
Maybe targeted to my brother Rabbi Sunny, whom I know for a long time, and our Imam, respected Imam Sheikh Jalil, more than, but they're welcome to answer too. I'm sometimes and a lot of times confused about how to define who is a terrorist, because a lot of times it's defined through motivation of politics. All right. I'll give you an example. I know that I agree with you. Jews, the Israelis, even before Moses, started preaching and saying that they suffered, and they're suffering till today. And as Sheikh Jalil said, that Shias are the first targets of terrorism. Even before when the Prophet started his missionary mission, and after his death, till today, we are the target of terrorism, unfortunately. But we see here in the modern history, terrorism, like today, he's a terrorist, next day he gets a Nobel Peace Prize, like Yasser Arafat. To everybody's definition was a terrorist. I mean, not Palestinians, of course. And Menachem Begin and others, a lot of Zionist leaders who were terrorists, real terrorists, but they were leaders all the time and respectable leaders. No one called them terrorists. Yasser Arafat, he turns into a Nobel Prize winner for peace. So who is now in Afghanistan? I was, following that from, the point I was working where the whole, how the jihad, Islamic jihad was created by CIA, and I see it, openly. And they were terrorists, but they were the jihadis, and later on, same government and same United States called them terrorists. So can you define to me who is terrorist? I don't know now.
Well, first of all, the definition I have always used for terrorist is one who attacks the innocent. It's one thing to attack a soldier on the battlefield. It's one thing if nations go to war against other nations and armies face armies, even small squads. That's not terrorism. But when the target are innocent children in a school, that's terrorism. When the target are people driving home from work across a road, perhaps in the West Bank, and that in itself, that act of driving is a provocation, but all those people are trying to do is get home to supper, that's terrorism. Bombing an office building, killing thousands of people, that is terrorism.
But there's motivation behind it, political motivation behind
But that's where we separate the freedom fighter from the terrorist. The freedom fighter goes and he fights those who oppress him. Now, you may say, well, how do we define the oppressor? Oppressors tend to be governments.
Now in Syria, you see,
So that's how we get to that, one man's terrorist, another man's freedom fighter saying is because we have allowed over the last century, and historians who perhaps know more than I will say it's not just the last century, but this idea that became popular in the 20th century of total war, civilian populations are reasonable targets, just as much as military targets, I think has been the greatest evil that we have perpetrated upon ourselves. That, no, people who are non-combatants should be out of the fight. But we don't. Our governments don't. They consider it. And if you're just a bystander and you get killed, well, you're just collateral damage. Mistakes get made in the smoke of battle. So a hospital gets bombed. And we cannot forgive that. And the fact that our nation is silent, and for that matter, even the Afghans are silent about this, tells me more about political corruption, evil within our political systems, than it does about human beings.
Thank you.
So last two questions, so we're going to wrap up the program and we're going to serve the dinner right away after this program.
Smells good.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm a member of this local community and also a member of a local Maryland political organization called the Howard County Muslim Council. And so my question is to any of you on the panel, do you feel as though there is I'd say a good way to work with, as scholars and as religious lay members, a good way to work with other political organizations in order to empower the community and also foster understanding? Or do you think there's perhaps a better way? Thank you for your time, any of you guys.
So you mean working as a political organization as opposed to like a civil society or community service?
Well, more like sort of using the political organization as a liaison to kind of help foster understanding and help spread value. Like, for example, the Howard County Muslim Council basically assists the Muslim community and other communities within Maryland to empower them for the political process. So I'm wondering if there's a way to also, as, I guess, since you guys are religious leaders, a way to use political organizations for you to sort of help the community, empower the community.
I think it's extremely important for a number of reasons. One, for the most important that Rabbi Sunny mentioned, which is you only bring about change, the best way to bring about change is getting involved in the political process. I think it's one of the most important things that the Muslim American community can do is to participate. The other reason is the other issue that we heard from our visitor. It's hard to hate up close. The more interaction you have with non-Muslims on a regular basis, the more people you touch to say, you know what, Muslims aren't that bad. I actually know a Muslim. I do this political activity together. I go campaigning together. The more people, non-Muslim lives you touch and your friends touch and your families touch, the more we become part of the fabric of American society. And people become less afraid of us.
I want to thank you. I think I got a fairly powerful voice. I want to thank everyone for being here. I'm very impressed with the speakers and the areas they're covering. But one of the things that I've always felt is there's not enough education about Muslim religion. That I've been to a mosque several times, but I still do not understand. Like in the United States, you can learn a fair amount about Christianity if you're Jewish, or if you're Jewish, or you can do the other way. I don't find that same education, and I would believe that if there was more education about the real tenets of the Muslim religion, that people could understand that we deal with some of this extremism, because then people wouldn't feel as isolated. How do we educate?
Yes, I absolutely agree with you that there is a shortage of that field in America. And unfortunately, the reason is lack of the resources to do so here in America. That is why you see most of us, before we become religious scholars, you have to go overseas to learn there and then come back. Because to become more religious, to become more knowledgeable in religion, there is a certain called paradigm that one have to learn in order to become religious. But the key of the point is, some of our centers are working on it. We have some kind of basic teachings about Islam that we offer. Like sometimes we have people who come in our center and we give them some education about Islam. But we really need to have those facilities where we can have at least some basic teachings where somebody can come and learn more about what Islam is about for a short period of time. But generally now, unfortunately, we don't have that much here, and it needs to have that kind of facilities so we can educate people for that matter. Yes.
We need more Anne-Marie Jeffries.
Props to your wife, yes.
Okay,
I would just like to, before we go, just to finish, just to top off what Stuart said, I think also there's a timeline for that. If you think about it, when the first generation of Jews came to the United States in the 1850s, everybody went back to Germany or Lithuania to learn to be a rabbi and then came back to the U.S. It took about 40 years to establish the first seminaries for Judaism in the United States, first being the Hebrew Union College out in Cincinnati. So that was 1896. No, 1886, sorry, 1886. So it took a while. It took about a generation. And my hope is that now that we have a much larger Muslim community in the United States, that within a generation, your children will solve that problem.
Okay, I'm going to ask to give closing comments. I particularly enjoyed this session a lot. I was impressed by all the speakers here, and especially Rabbi and Imam, who gave a lot of positive thoughts. We are putting some efforts together for love, peace, and unity under the guidance of Jalil. This is called Dawa program, and we are going to be distributing materials in the center. We'll have some material who people can get it from outside. We are also creating some websites. But whatever we can do, we would be at your service. Anytime you can call us regarding any information, whatever we can do, we will do, inshallah. But thank you very much, everybody, for coming over here. Dinner is ready. Please come and enjoy the dinner.
Again, you guys.
Please come out to the dinner. The two tables set are one for ladies, one for gents.